Looking for NFL football? Stop right here. You found your home for weekly NFL talk and fantasy football. Coming to you live from the BackupPunter.com. This is the Backup Punter Podcast. Now, here's your host, the man who thinks fullbacks win championships, Keegan Matheson.
Week 5 is in the books, down the drain, maybe we'll call it if you did watch any of the games. Some big injuries. Jamaal Charles is gone for the year with a suspected torn ACL. We'll talk about that, who you can target on the waiver wire today. Some teams that are up, some teams that are down. We'll go through our studs and duds. We'll get you all wrapped up here for the week that was on the Backup Punter Podcast, and we'll send you off into Week 6 with a good strategy to either extend your lead in your fantasy league or save the season. I'm in both modes in a couple of my leagues. I had a tough week. In one of my leagues, I had the second highest scoring week, but the guy that had the highest scoring week was the one I was playing. Similar situation in another league. Antonio Brown, kind of screwed me a bit. That Ben Roethlisberger injury was a killer. Not if you're a Le'Veon Bell owner, but if you're an Antonio Brown owner. So we'll get into that. Now, as always, the Backup Punter Podcast is brought to you by the fine people at Dynasty Sports Empire Fantasy Sports and the Dynasty Sports Empire Podcast Network. So check them out online or check them out on Twitter right now at DSE_hockey and DSE_basketball. Dynasty Fantasy Startup Basketball Leagues. They're going to be going soon. The hot ticket, that's the one sport that I've yet to conquer. I guess not conquer in terms of skill or knowledge, but just wrap my head around. So maybe this is the year that I'll see you in one of those Dynasty Fantasy Basketball Leagues. Is Vince Carter still good? Can I still draft Vince Carter? He'll be my first overall pick. So you can also follow me on Twitter at The Backup Punter, like the page on Facebook, or visit the website. I have an address on the internet, thebackupunter.com, and one of the regular features you'll see each week is the Fantasy Studs and Duds, and we'll lead the show off with that like we usually do. Now that is, it's a good wrap-up of the week that was. Helps you keep track on who's doing well, who's doing poorly, and get a temperature for what's going on in the league. Now, unfortunately, we've got some return members to the Dud team this week, but we'll start off with our studs, who had a very unlikely quarterback. Blake Bortles was a streaming option for many people. Unfortunately, one of my opponents had him too. But that Jacksonville offense looks like it can finally do something, which is more than we thought for most of last year in the first few games. Blake Bortles can at least put up numbers. Whether he wins or not, well, that doesn't matter because this is fantasy. But he's putting up numbers. RB1 on the stud team this week, Doug Martin, had a big week. I was high as hell on this guy entering the season, and I've spent a few weeks looking very wrong. But this one went well, 150 yards from scrimmage, over 150, 3 touchdowns. If the Buccaneers could just stay involved in some games, he'd have a huge year. Unfortunately, Jameis Winston looks terrible, and he's throwing interceptions whenever he gets the opportunity. But Doug Martin, there's still a lot there. Devonta Freeman, of course, almost 200 yards from scrimmage, a touchdown, won the game for them twice. It's just a load of crap. That call got called back there. Just like that Tyler Eifert touchdown a few weeks ago. He was not down. The ball had crossed the plane, but he didn't complete the action. The NFL is losing me with their rule book. They're losing me with a couple other things, too, which I'll get to after the studs and duds. Wide receiver 1 on the stud team, Andre Johnson, who I declared dead last week, who I stuck a fork in along with most people. 2 touchdowns. Andre Johnson had a big game with Matt Hasselbeck under center. That's not going to continue. You're not going to see these numbers again, but it puts him back into the conversation for a weekly dart throw. And he's 34 years old. There's no juice left. Maybe this was just one last gasp against his old team, but there's something there. Wide receiver 2 is Allen Hurns, who I've been pumping on this show for a few weeks now. A big waiver addition. I'll include him on the sleepers this week, but he should be owned in your league already. He's producing touchdowns that might get cut into with Julius Thomas coming back into the lineup consistently, but Allen Hurns looks like the clear-cut number 2 option there. And then wide receiver 3, Marquez Wilson. Now, if you follow on Twitter at the backup punter, about an hour before kickoff, I tweeted out that you've got to add Marquez Wilson if you can, because Alshon Jeffrey was announced to be out, so was Eddie Royal. So Marquez Wilson was the number 1 guy with Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler is an absolutely fine fantasy quarterback for your wide receivers because he puts up numbers. He makes mistakes and he loses, but that doesn't matter for your receivers. You saw that with Brandon Marshall. Alshon Jeffrey, when he's healthy, he can produce a top-end fantasy receiver. Wilson did that, put up 85 yards and a touchdown. So keep an eye on him next week. It depends on the health of the guy ahead of him. Then Tyler Eifert was the TE1 again. The guy that I put my entire fate into is almost the number 1 highest scoring tight end in all of fantasy. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. They had a good day. I suggested them as a streamer last week. I did say to take the Jaguars over them, but I knew that game would have one team come out of it, and it was the Buccaneers. Moving into the dud team, we've got Peyton Manning making his regular appearance on the dud team. Another bad game, 2 interceptions, both to Charles Woodson. This was the one guy I just refused to draft this season. He could have fallen to me in the 15th round, and it's just one of those things where you pick off a guy before your draft starts, and you just say, I'm not going to have this guy on my roster. There's no way I'll get value with this guy. For me, that was Peyton Manning, and he has just looked bad. He is throwing up passes that kind of resemble punts, which are much easier to intercept, and the run game is still trying to get going too. There's no balance to that offense. Thankfully, they have an incredible defense. But Peyton Manning, he killed some rosters again this week. Looking at running backs who killed some rosters, Eddie Lacy, I've got to be hard on the Packers this week. He's usually a slow guy to ramp up. September is not ever his month, but we're into October now. He needs to get going. Jeremy Hill, same thing in Cincinnati, making another appearance on the dud team. Giovanni Bernard's getting in there on passing downs, getting a lot of touches. And Jeremy Hill was supposed to be the safe pick. Well, he hasn't been. It's been an ugly year for Jeremy Hill, and a lot of owners are losing multiple games because of Jeremy Hill. You can't have that. Getting into the wide receiver duds, we've got another Packer. We have Randall Cobb. Very poor game for Randall Cobb. The ball was going more to Ty Montgomery, James Jones, Richard Rodgers. And Randall Cobb missed out this week. But the theme of these receivers on the dud team this week, they're going to get theirs eventually. Just like wide receiver 2, Demaryius Thomas. It's pretty common for a quarterback to drag his wide receiver onto the dud team. That's what happened here. Wide receiver 3, Dante Moncrief. 3 yards this week. That's brutal. Tight end 1 on the dud team. A guy I've talked about a few times. I cannot understand what the Seahawks are doing with him. That's Jimmy Graham. That was a bad trade. First-round pick, one of their best defensive linemen. Russell Wilson is losing weight so he can be faster, so he can avoid the pass rush right now. The Seahawks' pass blocking is so bad that Russell Wilson has been forced to go on a diet. It's a bit bizarre to me. And then the dud defense, Baltimore Ravens. The Cleveland Browns torched the Ravens. The Ravens are headed for a high draft pick this year, which, if you're going to fail, be the worst. But, higher expectations for those Baltimore Ravens this year. So it was a bizarre week in the NFL, as it always is. A couple of the points, and in no particular order, really, I won't try to even set them up, but a couple of the points that just really struck me. Of course, there was the entire Greg Hardy mess. He said he'd come out guns blazing. People linked that to his domestic violence incident where he threw a woman onto a bed or a futon or something covered in weapons, in guns. And I saw that and I thought, you know what? He's just an idiot. He didn't mean that. If you think Greg Hardy is intelligent enough to put those two things together, you're out of your mind. This guy's a dumbass. But then he went into talking about Tom Brady's wife, how he hoped Giselle would bring her sister to the game. And you can just hear the women of America swooning at Greg Hardy. That guy doesn't deserve to be in the league. He doesn't deserve to be making an NFL paycheck, but that's what it is. Then the NFL, yesterday, got Deadspin's Twitter account banned. Something to do with tweeting out GIFs of football games, things that weren't licensed properly. So Deadspin's Twitter account went down. A couple on SB Nation did, I think, as well. Twitter accounts just completely fried because the NFL got involved. Originally, we thought it was Major League Baseball, but nope, it was the NFL. This same NFL that told D'Angelo Williams he could not wear pink all season long to honor his mother. Just like they wear breast cancer pink in October, he wanted to wear it all year long. But no, he cannot do that. This is a league where Greg Hardy can come back, make millions of dollars, do what he does. A league where you can beat people's heads together to the point where they have severe brain damage, ruin their lives, send them off into their 30s, broken human beings. But I swear to God, if you wear pink, or if you tweet out a GIF of a football play, we will kick your skull in. The NFL's a beautiful thing. Then one last thing that just killed me this morning. Woke up this morning, and I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter from ESPN, from the NFL, pointing out that a female referee made a correct call on Monday Night Football, which I think is the most ridiculous story, the most ridiculous headline that I've seen all season long. Now, on Monday Night Football, this was one of the final plays there with Le'Veon Bell at the goal line. And ESPN, SportsCenter, they had tweeted out pictures. Sarah Thomas, first female NFL official, gets the call right on the final play of the game. Are you kidding me? Woman does her job right is a headline that you're going to run? Woman does something right is something you're going to beat your chest about as a league? What a load of crap. And each week I find myself moving away from being an NFL fan to being someone who follows the NFL. Now, I follow the NFL just as close, but at some point it just overwhelms you. Just the endless crap. It's ridiculous. So let's move into some real football. So, of course, the big story is Jamaal Charles this week. And that's too bad because somehow, some way, I think Jamaal Charles is still underrated. His yards per carry is astounding. Now, he is going to be replaced, but who by? Well, for the Chiefs, does it matter anymore? They're 1-4. They're in the basement of the AFC West. Their season's toast, I think. They need to really reevaluate some things this coming offseason, unless they get a miracle. So after the injury in that game, Charkandrick West got 18 snaps. Second-year player out of, I think, Abilene Christian. 18 snaps. Niall Davis took 4. I'm not a Niall Davis supporter. I don't think he's as good as a couple fantasy outbursts seem to indicate. I don't. He's a fine football player. He's in the NFL, but I don't think he's this second coming of Jamaal Charles when he gets the rock. Andy Reid has said that Charkandrick West is better in the passing game, and that's what they need because those guys are terrified to push the ball downfield. Jeremy Maclin's getting a little more involved, but they're going to need someone for Alex Smith to dump the ball off to. That's why I think that Charkandrick West is going to be the lead guy. He has been the last few weeks. He's the backup. People are treating this like it's a hot take of some sort, but he's the second-string running back. First-string guy's down, he's up. It will be kind of a 65-35 split, something like that, but he's the number one guy. On the waiver wire, that is who I'm targeting this week. Charkandrick West. Of course, as we all expected, to be a waiver wire target. And Niall Davis, you know what? If you have a roster spot to burn that you're completely not using and you can't get Charkandrick West, why not? Go for it, see what happens. Or even if you're in a league with massive rosters and you can get both, go for it. You know, it's important that we don't just talk about this like everyone is playing in a standard roster league. I play in a league with some massive rosters. An 8-team league, but huge rosters just to keep the talent level where it needs to be. So if you're in a league like that, you can even roster both. See who you get out of it. In that league right now, I have both C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman rostered. It's screwing me twice, but you know what? When a guy emerges, you'll have him. So that's the big news this week. Charkandrick West. It's the guy you want to have on your roster. And now with the MLB playoffs in full swing, I hope you're cheering for the Blue Jays. You should be. We're going to go into a new segment that I'll roll out here each week on the Backup Punter podcast called 3 Up, 3 Down. I will look at Three teams that improved their standing this week. Maybe they didn't even win, but they look better. And three teams that are down, trending in the wrong direction. I'm not even going to conclude Seattle on this list because I'm not sure. I keep expecting them to burst through and start punching people in the throat, but it's not happening yet. That was a tough loss to Cincy. Andy Dalton is finally getting some credit. I've been a Dalton supporter for years, and people look at you like you're an idiot. So I'm thrilled he's finally getting something done. The first team up is the Philadelphia Eagles. Sam Bradford started off with 2 end zone interceptions, looked like crap, then finally turned it around. We've seen this a couple times with Chip Kelly teams, where these rosters need a little while to come together. One thing I don't like about how Chip Kelly runs a roster is that he flips over so many players. And it takes a few weeks to develop chemistry, to understand the offense as a working organism of itself, with all 11 men knowing what's going on. Seems like that's what happened here. Sam Bradford clicked. Downfield, he did well. Jordan Matthews still needs to get much more involved, but Ryan Matthews did well. DeMarco Murray did well. That running game got going. That's going to help a lot. Another team that I think went up this week is the Washington Redskins. They lost late in that game, in overtime actually, but again, they are grinding on teams, and they're getting an identity. They are pesky. They are sticking around. Now, it's kind of put their whole roster into fantasy irrelevance. Alfred Morris, Matt Jones, they've got Thompson back there, Kirk Cousins, Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson's out. All of these are guys that I don't want to rely on any of them. But the Redskins are getting something of an identity. So that's encouraging because they've been a dumpster fire for so many years. And now they're playing tough football, and there's some level of effort involved, which wasn't the case in the Robert Griffin era. And the last team up this week, St. Louis Rams, another team that lost. But look at what Todd Gurley did against the Green Bay Packers, and they've really turned their run defense around. Clay Matthews in the middle there, B.J. Raji playing great football, maybe the best of his career. Todd Gurley made them look foolish. 30 rushes, 159 yards. And the NFL draft almost makes me numb to saying that a player will be special or will be a great prospect. Because you hear that about everyone, and after a while, I just stop caring. Oh, this guy's going to be that. This guy will be... Whatever. I really stop caring after a while, after hearing all that. Todd Gurley is the guy I believe in. I was cautiously optimistic about him entering the season. I was almost worried he'd come back mid-season and slowly ramp up, and we'd have to wait until 2016. Jeff Fisher is a badass with his running back usage, and I love it. There's a lot of reasons not to love Jeff Fisher and how he calls a game, but one thing he does, if he finds a running back he likes, he's going to run the hell out of them. Now, this isn't good for Todd Gurley's chances of playing into his mid-30s by any means, but 30 rushing attempts in this game, just a couple weeks back from injury. This is how it's going to be with Todd Gurley. And in fantasy football, carries are almost more important than skill. I will take a decent running back that gets 20 carries over a great running back that gets 14. Any day of the week, you need opportunity. Todd Gurley is going to be a rare combination of extreme carries and extreme talent, something that you might only see in a Matt Forte, an Adrian Peterson, these guys that really get fed the rock. DeMarco Murray last year. Todd Gurley has a chance to be the number one fantasy back in 2016, which is astounding. If they can get any type of quarterback, and I mean a warm body, Nick Foles is useless right now. He's absolutely useless. He can barely move his feet in that pocket. And the pressure on Sunday absolutely swallowed him. He didn't have a clue what he was doing. But if you get a decent quarterback, a Ryan Fitzpatrick, put in a Ryan Fitzpatrick to that offense, anyone that can just handle it, because I don't want to see that box get stacked against Gurley. Because you've got Todd Gurley, and you've also got Tavon Austin, who is one of the hidden gems in this league. And if Todd Gurley can stay hot, he's going to be the best thing that's ever happened to Tavon Austin. I said that last week. I believe it still. Tavon Austin on end-arounds, on deep passes. He can even take it and throw it out of the backfield, I'm sure. But he is the 1-2 punch with Gurley. St. Louis Rams have all the pieces. They just need a damn quarterback. Maybe a real receiver, too. I won't call Tavon Austin a number one receiver. He's an offensive weapon. Isn't that what the Jaguars coined Denard Robinson? He's an offensive weapon, but they need a legitimate receiver, a pass catcher. But all the other pieces are there. Look at that defense. Now, looking into the teams that are down this week, the Baltimore Ravens, torched by McCown, like I said. Their number 2 and number 3 receivers in this game were their running back and their fullback, Justin Forsett and Kyle Juszczyk, however you say it, the fullback out of Harvard. He was their third receiver in this game. That's not going to work. I know Crockett Gilmore's out. I know Steve Smith is out. Kamar Aiken was the number 1 receiver. But Joe Flacco isn't getting any help. And I almost feel for the guy because look at that group of wide receivers. He needs somebody. I still don't like that Brashad Perryman pick. I hope he proves me wrong. I don't like that pick at all. But he needs some help there. He's not getting it. Terrell Suggs is out too. So that team, like I said, they're heading towards a draft pick, it seems. And if that is going to be the case, fantastic. Get that high pick. Beef up that defense. Grab a top receiver or something. But I think the worst thing that can happen to the Ravens is a late season surge that ends with them just missing the playoffs. You don't want that either. Also going down, the Detroit Lions pulled Matt Stafford in the third quarter, and they looked absolutely horrible. If Dan Orlovsky plays in the football game for you, you've had a shit week. It's that simple. Matt Stafford looked bad. So did the rest of the offense, and I'm baffled why this offense can't get it going. Eric Ebron, now he's out, but he has all the talent in the world. Calvin Johnson, there's still something in the tank, even though his contract is going to be an albatross that just kills that franchise. Golden Tate. I love Golden Tate. Fantastic option there. Even Brandon Pettigrew, great blocking tight end, out of the backfield. You've got Amir Abdullah, a rookie who should be doing so much more, who had a ton of hype entering the season and has kind of fallen flat on his face. There are all these pieces, so it's not making sense to me. The Lions' struggles are a little curious. So is there going to be some scheme changes, personnel changes? I don't know, but something has got to give. Because the talent's there, and they're wasting the tail end of Calvin Johnson's career. And then in Houston, speaking of wasting, with my third team on the down this week, they are wasting J.J. Watt, wasting Hopkins, wasting Foster, wasting Clowney, who is starting to look like the generational talent he was billed as. Vince Wilfork is the most overpaid pylon I've seen in my life. He's doing nothing in the middle of that defensive line because they don't have a quarterback. And this is so frustrating to me. And if I'm a fan of the Texans, and the Texans don't make a huge push for a quarterback this offseason, I'd lose my mind. You have these players, and these are elite players. Hopkins, Foster, Watt, Clowney, truly elite. They're not just good on a crappy team. They are elite players. DeAndre Hopkins is one of the more underrated receivers in this league. He's getting all the coverage and still dominating. Put any quarterback, even a top 20, the 18th best quarterback in this league, onto that offense, and I think good things happen. But right now, they're swinging back and forth between Brian Hoyer, Ryan Mallett. Neither of them are good, is the harsh reality, and there's a quarterback shortage in the NFL. So the Texans need to go after a quarterback in the draft, or they need to explore the trade market. Something. Even something like a Jay Cutler. I come back to Cutler again, but even that would be good enough. Just a guy that can start, that has started, that can put up numbers, that can push the ball downfield, move a little coverage around. He doesn't need to be Jesus himself. Just a decent quarterback, and they haven't had that in so long. So the Houston Texans, after all that Hard Knocks hype, that's how much Hard Knocks helps your team, I guess, but they're going nowhere fast. So this is the Backup Punter Podcast. My name's Keegan Matheson, here with you. This is episode 28, I believe it is. Episode 28. And we're going to get into our weekly streamers. I'm going to quit calling them sleepers because by this point in the season, you're not really looking for any long-term solutions on your roster. You're just looking to patch things up. If you need to make a big splash, trade market is likely where you're looking. So let's start off with quarterbacks we're going to stream this week, and it is a bad week to need a quarterback. Let me tell you that. If you do have a quarterback on a bye, I hope you've got one on the bench, because it's not a nice week. I guess you'd look at Blake Bortles versus Houston, if his shoulder's okay. He got a shoulder injury now in his throwing arm. Blake Bortles would probably be the first guy I look to. Ryan Fitzpatrick versus the Redskins, I think he'd be a good bet for 16 to 20 points, nothing huge. And then Jay Cutler versus Detroit, just because of how poor Detroit looked, if he can get Alshon Jeffrey or Eddie Royal back and help him out. So you're looking at Bortles, Fitzpatrick, Cutler this week. I'd lean towards Bortles if healthy, but again, not ideal. Then looking to running back, of course, we have West. Jump on West from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Minnesota Vikings, actually, this week. Thomas Rawls versus the Carolina Panthers. And I'd say even if Marshawn Lynch comes back, which he's going to, reports this week are that he will be back for Sunday. If you have a bench spot to burn, why not have Thomas Rawls in there? A, Marshawn Lynch could re-injure himself, but B, is this the 2016 starter for the Seattle Seahawks? Might be. If you're in a keeper league, a dynasty league, Thomas Rawls, you want to have him on the roster. And then Shane Vereen versus the Philadelphia Eagles. He's their best threat out of the backfield. Rashad Jennings looks slow. Andre Williams looks slow. Shane Vereen might not get a lot of touches in the run game, but Eli Manning likes him in the pass game. Right now, I think, is the sweet spot when you should be buying on Shane Vereen. And then at running back, look at the Detroit backfield. Watch for Theo Riddick. Watch for Joique Bell. If Joique Bell can come back from injury, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I might even take a flyer on him, because Amir Abdullah isn't doing anything right now when he should be. So it's a situation I'm going to monitor through the week. I'm going to look at the practice reports, see if Joique Bell comes back healthy. Theo Riddick, maybe he's getting more involved in practice. Be aware of that situation. At wide receivers, I am looking for Kamar Aiken of the Baltimore Ravens facing the 49ers this week. If you don't have him rostered already, it's time to, because he is their starting receiver. And I've got Willie Snead of the New Orleans Saints going up against the Falcons. I like that matchup. He is their clear-cut second option, I feel, now in that offense. Tavon Austin, even though he's going into a bye, I think he's worth rostering if you have a spot. Alan Hearns, of course. Ty Montgomery of the Green Bay Packers. If Devontae Adams is not healthy next week, he'll be the third option in that passing game again. And with the way some of those San Diego corners are playing, having him as the third guy on the inside might be advantageous. Ty Montgomery of the Packers. And then a late flyer, I guess, Dwayne Harris versus Philadelphia. Now, that's if Ruben Randle is out for the Giants. Something to look at. If you need a tight end this week, of course, the legend, Gary Barnidge, is always someone you can target. He's playing Denver. Richard Rodgers is a tight end I would target on a streaming week. The Packers tight end playing San Diego again. And then Crockett Gilmore, if he can come back healthy. I don't know if he will, but keep an eye on him, because any warm body in that Baltimore pass-catching group is going to be worth a look. Then if you are looking for a defense or a special teams, not a fantastic week, because a lot of the lower-end defenses have bad matchups. If you can get Cincinnati playing Buffalo, that's one that I do like, especially if Carlos Williams is still injured, LaShawn McCoy is still injured. Looking a little further down the list, though, if you need to scrape the bottom of the barrel, my suggestion would be the Minnesota Vikings playing the Kansas City Chiefs. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, and I think that Minnesota can handle Jeremy Maclin, and I think they can handle Travis Kelce. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the run game. Now, I did tell you to pick up Charcandrick West, so this is counterintuitive, of course, but you've got Alex Smith back there. You've got a backup running back. You only have one receiver on the entire damn roster, and they're 1-4. So this is a good matchup, and it's as good as you're going to find from the low ownership defenses this week. And like I always say, you win and lose your weeks on defense. I won another week with the Denver Broncos defense this week, actually. They've saved my season, I think. So I'm very thankful to them, and I'm Thankful to Peyton Manning for playing poorly and allowing teams to stick around and throw some interceptions for my own selfish personal benefit. So this has been the Backup Punter Podcast 28. We'll get you off on your way quick here today. Just a quick wrap-up of the week that was, the week that is coming. So enjoy Week 6. It gets started on Thursday night. The Atlanta Falcons, hopefully they'll have Julio Jones in the lineup. And hopefully the quality of football on Thursday is something above the level of terrible, although I have very, very cautious expectations on that. So as always, you can follow along on Twitter, on Facebook. Come on over to the website, and if you have any questions for the show, tweet in, email in, thebackupunter@gmail.com, and I'm always happy to feature it on the show, whether it's football advice, question about a recipe, anything you've got. So reach out anytime, because I'm always happy to hear from listeners. So thank you again for listening. My name's Keegan Matheson, hoping that all of your punts in life stop on the 1 yard line. Let's talk next week.